Wisconsin's two-year spending plan is now law. Fox 11's Robert Hornacek is with Governor Scott Walker in our studio this morning with more on the budget.
Good morning, Rachel. Thanks for joining us, Governor Walker. Appreciate you being here.
Good to be back.
First of all, big picture. Talk about this budget from your perspective. What, in your estimation, does it accomplish?
Well, it's a great budget for taxpayers, for the hardworking taxpayers of Wisconsin. Everybody in the state who pays taxes is going to see a drop in their income tax rates. About 80% of that goes to what President Obama defines as the middle class. So this is a tremendously positive budget for anyone out there paying taxes. Income taxes go down, taxes on manufacturing and agriculture-related businesses will go down, taxes on small businesses will go down, more money for schools, more expansion of school choice, more money for not only each of those areas, but public health, mental health services, veterans, public safety, workforce development. This is a good budget all the way around to get the state working again.
What's that figure? The 80% covers up to how much?
The president during the last campaign said up to $250,000 was his definition of the middle class. So that's 80% of all this goes right there. And for the few that are above it, most of those people are small business owners who plow that money right back into their business.
What do you say to some of your critics, especially some Democrats, who say a lot of this tax cut's going to the wealthy?
It goes to everybody who pays taxes. Taxes across the board go down. Every tax rate goes down. Most of it goes, the majority of it goes to people making between $15,000 and $50,000. But everybody who pays taxes gets a portion of that back. So it's only fair. If you pay taxes and I pay taxes, we each pay at different rates. We should each get a part of that surplus back. The difference is the last time the Democrats controlled the governorship and the state assembly and state senate, they raised taxes by several $billion at the state level. They raised it even more when it came to property taxes. Of course they want to talk about that because the contrast was a few years ago. That's why we lost all those jobs, and instead we've balanced the budget in a way that allows us to go forward and create more jobs in the state of Wisconsin.
Let's talk about the expansion of the school voucher program. First of all, a lot of people, or some people, expected you to lift the caps because you have there's a very powerful veto pen that you have.
Right.
Why did you decide to not change the program?
Well, my word's good. As people know, whether they love me or hate me, I keep my word on things. And this is one where I sat down with members of the state senate, state assembly, worked out a deal on education overall. We put $300 more into public education per kid per year. That's a tremendous increase on top of all the other reforms we give them, whether it's in Green Bay or Kaukauna or Appleton or other places across the state. We give them the tremendous new assets. Both my kids graduated from public schools. I went to public schools. I want strong public schools. But I also want families here and across the state to have more choices. And so I worked out a reasonable compromise to make that statewide, to start it out slowly, but to show we could make the case. And so I wanted to make sure that when I worked out a reasonable compromise that got the consensus of members from both the Assembly and the Senate, that we kept true to that. And that's why with the veto, there was a provision added that I think brought an unintended consequence to go a little bit further. And I said, I'll make the case in 2 years when things continue to improve that we can do that as well as support our public schools.
What do you say to folks who just don't buy the public or the voucher program, and they'll say this diverts money from public education and ends up hurting public schools, and they don't want their tax money spent on private schools?
Well, one, it doesn't. We put more money in here, so there's not taking a penny out of public schools. Public schools get more under this budget. Like I said, $300 per kid over the next 2 years. So there already is more money in there, on top of the fact that our reforms are saving millions of dollars for school districts by saving on bidding out health insurance or saving on retirement costs, things of that nature. So we're putting more money in the classroom. We got rid of seniority and tenure, so now our schools can hire and fire based on merit. They can pay based on performance. They can put the best and the brightest in their classrooms and keep them there. But for some kids, not most, about probably 80–85% of the kids in the state will still get their education at traditional public schools, which is why we put more into reading, we put more into ACT, and we put more assets and flexibility into our schools. But for those that for whatever reason, families who have sons and daughters that can't get the right education there, we put more in for not only choice schools, we pushed charter schools, virtual schools, even more assistance to help out homeschool families to make sure that every kid, no matter what their background, gets access to a great education.
Let's talk about a couple of the vetoes. One, you took out the measure to create the private bail bond system. Why did you take that out?
2 years ago, I issued a similar veto. They narrowed it down this time, but I still am comfortable with the policy, and the Attorney General and other law enforcement officials asked me to do that, and that's what I did. I listened to them.
The decision to allow the Wisconsin Center for Investigative Journalism to stay on the UW campus, there had been some controversy about that. Some conservatives said, you know what, they shouldn't be there. Why did you take that out?
To me, this is something, a policy should be set by the Board of Regents, not specific to one entity, one organization like this. It should be an overall policy as to when you have both public and private dollars together, what should the policy be? It shouldn't be something that's done in the budget.
When you look at your first 2 years in office, you got a little under 2 years left in your first term. Your big promise back then was 250,000 new private sector jobs over 4 years. Last week there were some numbers that came out that showed, I think, a little over 60,000 in your
62.
first year. Yep. Some of your critics point to that and say, "See, Governor, your policies aren't working." Is that is that still a fair measuring stick? And what do you say to those?
It's a great target. It's an unfair criticism because those critics were the ones who presided over the government the 4 years before I took office. And we lost 133,000 plus jobs. So clearly, the policies of double-digit tax increases, billion-dollar budget deficits, and record job loss did not work. They failed in the past. It's why we had to do such an about-face to move our state forward. Since then, after losing all those jobs, we've gained, as you mentioned, more than 62,000 jobs. We have an aggressive goal. We had an aggressive target out there. I aimed high because I saw that those 133,000 jobs weren't just jobs. They weren't statistics. They were real people with real families, real households, and real communities all across the state. So I set a high bar because I wanted to make sure more of the people in this state were going back to work, not only to help them, but to help their families, to help their communities, to help the state as a whole. So I'm going to continue to push down that path. But you look at the contrast. I mean, Illinois, which has used the same policies that got us in trouble in the past, is still doing it today. Illinois has an unemployment rate, I should say, of over 9% right now, just like we were just 4 years ago. We're 2 points lower than that, in part because we've gone down the right path. We're at a point now where our business environment is moving into one of the top 20 in the country. 4 years ago, we were in the bottom 10. Illinois is still in the bottom 10. So there's a real contrast out there. I think if people look at the difference there, certainly in the first year and a half of our term before the recall election last June, a lot of businesses, particularly small businesses, were reluctant to add more jobs, not because they didn't like things. They loved what we did to turn the business climate around. They were just waiting to see if it would continue. And now I think going forward, that's exactly the path we're on. We're moving forward.
All right, Governor Scott Walker, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Stay with us. Good Day, Wisconsin. We'll be right back.